Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Charles Hambro, and I'm here to talk to you about three things today. The first one is the new attention economy. The second is how brands are capturing that attention. And then the third is how measurement works in virtual worlds. So, I was on my way to Advertising Week this morning and walking through Times Square. It's a sort of reminder of every single one of those billboards is desperately trying to capture your attention as consumers. And that very thesis that we live in an attention economy and every single brand is trying to capture your attention being the most valuable resource, one has to sort of think about the evolution of attention and how that's changed. I was just told by a colleague that it's 20 years of AdWeek today, or Advertising Week, I should say, today. And 20 years ago, I imagine the sort of opportunities that were available for brands were kind of limited between print, TV, and radio. The gatekeepers that owned print, TV, and radio that you had to speak to get in front of that audience would have been Viacom or Comcast, or if it was Vogue magazine, you'd have to speak to Condé Nast in order to get in front of that audience. And a bit of an evolution happened where actually the rise of digital, the rise of the internet, the rise of social media, there were new gatekeepers. People still read magazines, but then they started spending time on Instagram and Facebook. And those gatekeepers changed. So it was no longer Condé Nast that you needed to speak to get in front of your audience. It was now kind of Facebook you needed to speak to. So at GEEIQ, we believe that there is now an evolution of attention, and actually, we see that as virtual worlds, typically known as gaming platforms. And actually, not only has there been an evolution of attention, but there's been an evolution of the gatekeepers that own those audiences as well. The key point here is, gaming's been around for a very long period of time, but people are no longer just going into games to play, they're actually going into games to socialize. How do we measure that attention across all of those different verticals? Well, time spent is a pretty good one. And there's this kind of battle that's happening at the moment where the old world is kind of competing with the new world in terms of attention. If we think about the traditional social media platforms, they're becoming more gamified. If we think about the gaming platforms, they're becoming more social. And if we put a sort of yardstick in terms of the time spent in these new emerging platforms and the social media platforms, who's winning out? Well, Gen Z, it turns out that Roblox holds more attention time than traditional channels. TikTok is the one that everyone talks about for Gen Z, but actually Roblox has a longer attention time than TikTok. And actually, if we look inside the data on TikTok, over 3 trillion views of gaming content happen on that platform. And then YouTube's next, but again, 100 billion hours of content on that platform is gaming video content related. And then you have Fortnite at 60 minutes a day, then Minecraft, then there's Instagram, that being the sort of millennial platform, I suppose. And then you've got Twitch, which is a gaming live stream platform. So we're witnessing a shift of consumers spending more time in games, but actually spending more social time in games, as opposed to spending social time in traditional social media. And when it comes to brands, and at Advertising Week here, a lot of us work at brands or we're marketeers, we all sort of know the general stats for branded content engagement time on traditional social media. Here's the really exciting thing. It turns out that users inside virtual worlds spend longer periods of time inside that branded content than they do on traditional social media. If you think about it, it's kind of scrolling through a news feed and seeing an ad, or clicking a video and watching a 7-minute pre-roll advert on YouTube. Sorry, 7 seconds, not 7 minutes. Versus spending 11 minutes in a virtual experience on Roblox or Fortnite or Zepeto or Rec Room. you try and get a consumer to watch an 11-minute piece of branded content. That's very, very challenging. But that is the average for virtual worlds. So I think, GEEIQ is a 6-year-old. We had our 6-year-old birthday a couple of weeks ago. And we kind of entered this space in 2018 on the notion of the attention economy and more brands entering and kind of seeing that consumers were not just playing but socializing. And then I think 2 or 3 years in, this sort of metaverse word came up. And we went, God, that's kind of great for us because it means more and more brands understand this space and are going to kind of go in and they're going to need measurement, which is what we do. But the reality is I think a lot of brands in that period of time, and I'm talking 2020, 2021, they were going in with innovation teams, and the objective was very much press and PR. And unfortunately, they didn't really look at the data. They kind of looked on LinkedIn, and they went, where's this brand going? I want to go where this brand is going. But actually, if you look in the data, these were the predominant platforms that a lot of these brands went into in terms of virtual worlds. The reality of the situation is the user base inside these gaming content platforms are far greater than those sort of metaverse-based platforms. I don't want to say anything bad about Decentraland or Sandbox. They're fantastic platforms. But actually, there's a wealth of opportunity in other gaming platforms. OK, so I'm going to talk to you about the history of brands entering games, because actually brands have been going into the games for many, many years. Something changed about 5 years ago, which created this fundamental growth in terms of the number of brands entering. Typically, a brand would reach out to a game. There's one game developer, let's say Pokemon Go for now, 80 million players. It's unbelievable there's 80 million players inside that game, but there is. But the problem is when you reach out to one game that's not a platform, it's a game, that game can kind of choose whether your brand goes in or not. There's also a higher build cost because there's not an ecosystem of builders. There's what you have to go to Pokemon Go, and they are the only ones that can build inside Pokemon Go. And it takes a really, really long time. Our first customer at GEEIQ was Gucci, and we actually put them in Pokemon Go and went through this process. That was very successful and went really well, but it's certainly not scalable. So this was really, really good for temporary activations where it's sort of campaign-based, but by God, you've got to make sure you've got a lead time of 6 months to a year to execute that. The big change that happened was that there was this rise of this new type of game, which was not a game in the traditional sense. It was a game as a platform. And that's what a game like Roblox is. It's not actually a game. It's a platform where people and the users create games, very much in the same way that Instagram is a platform and users create profiles and content. The only difference, really, between Instagram and Roblox is Instagram is kind of 2D communication that's limited to video, copy, and image, and Roblox is 3D communication. But what this means is it creates the scalability that happened in traditional social media. So there's a much lower barrier to entry because there is an economy of ecosystem builders to build inside the Roblox platform. That actually leads to shorter lead times as well. Not only that, in the same way that you go onto Instagram, you create your Instagram profile, and then you gain followers, you can actually own an audience, and you can gain an audience. You can do that inside Roblox as well by creating your own experience and having a consistent user base go into that experience. Finally, that's a sort of scalable opportunity. It's a scalable opportunity for the gaming platform Roblox, but it's a scalable opportunity for brands to be able to get involved and constantly communicate with that audience. So I go back to Gucci and our journey with them since 2019, still customers. We love them very much. They absolutely see the space in the way that a lot of brands are now seeing this space, but they saw it very early. So they do have an engagement strategy for TikTok and Facebook and all the other traditional social media channels. But they treat the user-generated content gaming platforms in the very, very same way that they treat traditional social media, where actually they have a consistent engagement strategy for Roblox, Super QQ in China, and Sepeta in South Korea, all of which are reaching different audiences from a geographic location. The difference is the content they distribute on TikTok is slightly different to the content they distribute on Roblox. One is 2D, one is 3D. One has an average engagement time of 1.3 seconds. The other has an average engagement time of 11 minutes per user. And we know this in the data. Another customer of ours, H&M, one of the things we do is we combine all of the user time that's spent inside their traditional social media channels and then compare that to one of their virtual worlds. If we look month on month, their single Roblox experience basically beats all of their traditional social media channels when it comes to engagement time. I think May was the only one that didn't win, and that was because there was some sort of fashion show or something like this. So it's not just Gucci and H&M, but I think we're all aware in this room, we've witnessed a wealth of brands who are now looking at these new emerging platforms as communication channels to reach their audience, and they're expressing their brand values in a new way, in a way that's 3D as opposed to 2D. So one then has to ask the question, that's great, we've got kind of more time being spent with our brand inside these new platforms, but what does that actually equate to? Well, this is a graph that's kind of useful, which is Gen Z's, I think it's for fashion here, Gen Z's most loved brands. And what's very interesting, one of the things we do at Geek is we track every single branded activation that happens inside all of these gaming platforms. When we overlay the data here, there's a clear sort of correlation in terms of the number of activations and platforms these brands enter and the sentiment with this Gen Z audience. It's pretty obvious. I mean, it's just sort of talk to the consumer where they are. The equivalent would be you're kind of advertising in Vogue magazine the entire time, and you're kind of ignoring traditional social media. I think when we first started, really what was available inside these gaming platforms was that middle of the funnel stage, that consideration stage where you could build your experience and someone could go in and kind of get visibility on your brand. But what's really exciting, and certainly Roblox is the leader in this, is we're seeing every stage of the funnel now being available for brands inside these environments. So Roblox have now released immersive advertising. So it's not just going in and building a 3D experience, but actually you can purchase video advertising inside that particular platform. There's now direct response. So absolutely, you can generate revenue off digital assets. You can get email signups through CRM. But one of the recent things that actually Geek pioneered with another one of our customers, Walmart, is bringing real-world commerce to these platforms. And you would have seen most recently, I'm sure it'll come up on another slide, there's another partner that's just come in. So really, we're now getting past the stage of innovation, and now we're kind of going into marketing. I think if we look at all the customers that were reaching out to Geek in 2020, 2021, they were innovation teams. Now pretty much all the people we're speaking with are marketing teams, even particularly performance marketing teams. And again, now there's huge opportunities where every single Roblox user will be able to do Shopify integrations, where those hundreds of millions of people that go into your experiences, you're now going to be able to sell real-world products if you use Shopify. I'm sure there'll be more partners to be announced. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the landscape is today, because it's really important just to get a picture on that. Again, this is data coming directly from the Geek platform. And we started when there was roughly 10 brands that have entered virtual worlds. Those different colors are basically different gaming platforms. The dark blue one is Roblox. The light blue one is Fortnite, pretty much dominating the industry. But there's now almost 1,500 activations that have happened inside virtual worlds, and it's growing exponentially. I think the sort of death of metaverse hype was back in Q4 of 22. So that just shows you, kind of don't listen to the hype, because actually the data suggests otherwise. Actually, what that was the death of, it was the death of going into virtual worlds for the objective of press and PR. If you're a brand and you go into virtual worlds now and you think we're going to get a great press article out of this, not going to happen. So why are brands continuing to go in now? It's because they're seeing genuine value in comparison to traditional social media. So yes, why are, by the end of Q4 2023, we saw 700 brands enter with 1,000 activations. This is the most recent data that we can release here, which is 850 brands now with 1,200 activations. Why are there more activations than there are brands? Well, again, comparing this to traditional social media, a brand won't just have an Instagram profile. They'll probably have a X profile, they'll have a TikTok profile, they'll have a Facebook profile. That's why there are more activations than there are brands. Because actually, Gucci's not just in Roblox, it's also in Zapata, it's also in Super QQ. And if we compare the sort of these virtual world platforms, these evolution of social media, which ones are winning? Well, we can see Roblox in terms of brand experiences, and the number of brands that have entered that particular platform is absolutely dominating in this space. However, there's a massive uplift in terms of brands that are entering Fortnite, and Minecraft is something to watch as well. Fortnite are actually record numbers now. This is the latest data released by GEEIQ. You can see there's a massive spike that happened at Q4 2023, and we're continuing to see that rise in numbers on that particular platform. I think if we compare that to Roblox, we can see Roblox is still dominating, but again, they're closing the gap. I think we've got to rewind back to I don't know, when was it? Probably 2010, 2012, where brands were kind of deciding which social media platforms to go into. Was it Instagram? That's the biggest one. Is it Twitter I should go into? Is Facebook still strong? The dominating one, the meta equivalent in virtual worlds is Roblox right now, but there is a second runner, which is Fortnite. Another one of our customers, L'Oréal Paris, again, the way brands are entering have changed. So brands used to enter and they used to create a virtual experience, like you see the one on the right. But actually, what a lot of brands are doing now is they're entering doing something called integrations. What is an integration? An integration is very much like, if we compare it to traditional social media, it's going into an already existing experience and then putting your brand in that experience for a limited period of time. It's a bit like saying, okay, I'm not going to create my Instagram profile. I'm going to work with Kim Kardashian, and she's going to post stories. I'm reaching her community, which I know is big already, and I'm going in to sell a particular product or give a particular message. Integrations is now something that is massively on the rise in these virtual platforms. And we can see the numbers as an example of what you get. And actually, the rise of integrations, on the left there, you see the number of experiences, and that green bar on the right, you see the number of integrations. As a prediction, I think we're going to see a lot more integrations inside this space. It's a much lower barrier to entry, and you're able to garner a lot of engagement off the back of it. There's another bar. Actually, this is slightly better chart, because what this shows is the last quarter was the first quarter where there was significantly more integrations than there were brand experiences. Okay, here's some maths for you. I'm going to be scrutinized for this one, but let's give it a go. So one of the things that we do that's kind of really important is when a brand's speaking to us and saying, well, why don't I just go onto YouTube and do some pre-roll advertising, because I can reach that audience rather quickly doing it that way. Well, actually, if you break down the numbers, and we've done that here with regards to a 15-minute engagement time that a brand wants to spend, actually the cost per engagement is a lot higher in traditional media than it is inside these virtual world platforms. So financially, this kind of makes a bit more sense if you're looking to hit an audience at a good price. I'm going to talk a little bit about the growth industries because I think this space really kicked off with fashion and apparel, and every single fashion brand really started entering virtual worlds because it was very easy. You have an avatar, you can put clothes on that avatar, kind of makes sense, it's innovative, it's cool. But now we're seeing so many other industries enter this space. Automotive is one that is rapidly growing. I'd also keep your eye on retail too. If you're a consumer electronics brand, that is a massive growth space. Quite strange to even see video games enter this space from an advertising perspective, not from a game perspective. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about ones to watch. I think when we talk about this space, everyone talks about Roblox and Fortnite, and for good reason, because they are the largest platforms when it comes to monthly active users and the number of brands that activate in virtual worlds. But I think there are other platforms that we need to look at as well. This space is very early, and there's a battleground for dominance. The Sims is something I would look at very closely. If we look at the data in The Sims, the demographic is very different to that of Fortnite and Roblox. In some ways, a more desirable demographic to many brands. What with the Sims movie now being announced, this is going to be a platform I would watch in 2025. Minecraft is one that has an enormous user base, but it's typically not super brand friendly and not very scalable to enter. But I'm sure they're looking at Roblox and Fortnite with envious eyes in terms of the number of brands that are entering that space, and I'm sure they have strategies in the future to be a bit more scalable with that. Zepeto is one I always mention, based out of South Korea, large audience in Southeast Asia and Asia, and very social, the most social if we're comparing it to Roblox and Fortnite, and a large number of brands entering that world. And then Inzao is one many of you probably haven't heard of, which is very similar to The Sims, but it's come out of Asia by Krafton. It's actually unreleased, but it's garnered an immense amount of interest already, and that is one that I would look at. Finally, I'm going to give another prediction, which is incredibly controversial, because this is the platform that kind of got badly bullied for a very long period of time, and quite rightly so. They're spending a lot of money, and the picture on the right sort of went viral. Yes, it's a virtual world platform in the same way Roblox is. No, it doesn't have the user base that Roblox does and Fortnite does. But what's really interesting about it is, at the moment, it's very restricted to those big VR goggle headsets. And what people haven't really cottoned on to is Meta's wider strategy around this space. And I think they are certainly ones to look at in 2025 and beyond as a dominating platform here. So they are currently moving. They will still stay in VR, but they are currently moving that to mobile as well. And what's fascinating about that, when we compare it to the other virtual world platforms, is all they have to do is add a button there where they've got follow message, but there's a new button they add called enter. And when you can tap into Meta's user base, which, let's be honest, is almost hitting 4 billion monthly active users in comparison to Roblox's 300 million monthly active users, there's a kind of, okay, if they get this right, this could be very powerful indeed. And I'll let you in onto a bit of a story as to why I started GEEIQ back in 2018. I was working at another company, and one of my clients was Facebook. And I was speaking to them, and they were targeting gamers for advertising. And I said, why on earth are you doing that? And they basically said, well, Charles, the problem is people are going into these games to socialize as opposed to play, and they're not going on to Instagram as the alternative. As a company, we own digital social. If we don't go into this space, we are going to be disintermediated. So they knew very early on. And they have a very long-term strategy. I think they get bullied a lot for that picture, but they're the sleeping giant. So keep an eye on Meta Horizons Worlds. And actually, that kind of sums up what's happening today in the industry. we're seeing the gaming platforms move more and more from solitary individual games to more social games to eventually 3D communication channels. And we're seeing the traditional social media platforms move from kind of profile-based 2D video content and copy through to what I would call Snapchat, where it's avatar-based and AR-based, to, again, this center ground, which is, I think Roblox is the closest thing to that. And actually, we're seeing websites now change as well, where they're becoming sort of virtual stores with Imperia and Obsess. It's all moving to the center point, and it's a bit of a battleground to say who can get there first and who can get the maximum user base. And importantly, not just user base, but developer community as well. OK, so what do I do now? Well, these are many of the questions that kind of come up after one learns about the opportunity inside virtual worlds. Only children are playing games. Why should I go in there? I went into Decentraland, and it was pretty, or a couple people went in, but it really cost a lot of money. Saw no return. What's my KPIs? What's my ROI? What's the conversion impact? Gamers are not the target right now. We need to engage with female Gen Z. Does female Gen Z live in gaming? There's many, many questions that get asked, and that is why at GEEIQ we created a fully comprehensible data platform that allows every single brand out there to monitor, understand their marketing strategy, and then attribute performance once they've gone in. This is very showy off this slide. We're very proud of the number of brands that are working with us today, and we're continuing to grow. The key point is there's two ways that brands work with GEEIQ. One is platform only, where essentially they have access to all of the data we have, which, just to be absolutely clear, a lot of it is publicly available. We gather it together and draw insights out of it. And then a lot of it is private data, of which we have private data partnerships with a lot of these platforms that I mentioned today for brands to access before they get involved. And then I'm really proud to say we have an amazing team of experts, I believe best in class, because we've been doing this for 6 years, which in metaverse time is a sort of lifetime, where we really do know what we're doing in terms of strategic overview, monitoring, introducing to partners to build, and then, importantly, the reporting. So if I was just to end this talk, again, I'm going to revert back to the start, which is what's really important to understand is the attention has shifted. This has happened before, and it will happen again. We went from print TV and radio to digital social media. Now, if you ask anyone under the age of 20 years old and say, where are you hanging out with your friends? It's very unlikely they say Facebook. They might say Instagram. They'll probably say TikTok, and they'll probably say Snapchat. But Roblox and Fortnite will be in that conversation. And the experiences that they're having with their friends in Roblox and Fortnite are far more enriched and engaged than the experiences they're having on traditional social media. It's funny that social media is called social media because it's not actually that social. These gaming platforms are live. They are far more social than traditional social media. Another thing just to remember is brands are capturing that attention now. There's over 850 brands inside virtual worlds now that have strategies to reach these audiences. Cast your minds back to 2008, when there are a bunch of brands that said, you know what, I'm not going into Facebook. It's a bunch of university students. I'm going to continue advertising in Vogue magazine. I'm going to continue doing TV ads. And those ones that ignored that shift are the ones that had to pay the cost later to build. So there's a lot of brands that are already entering, and it's massively, massively growing. And then finally, this is obviously an incredibly biased one, because this is what GEEIQ does, but data and measurement is incredibly important. It's kind of 101. I understand for innovation teams, when your KPIs are more press and PR related, it's more about what's flashy. But actually, as we've now moved into marketing teams, and we've now moved into KPIs being return on investment, measurement and data before you go in and before you spend, and then once you spent to understand what you spent, it's basically very, very important. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for attending my talk and have a lovely rest of advertising week.